Welcome to Unite LA 2018. It's going to be fun times. Thanks so much for coming. This is the testing and QA open mic session, and we'll get into why we even have one of these right now. So, at Unity, we do a lot of testing. How much testing do we do, you might wonder. Well, I went and I checked, and the total number of tests that we run on our build farm in a typical day. So this was last Monday. It's a pretty big number. You ready? No, it's bigger. It's bigger. Okay, yeah. That's the total number of tests that we run on our build farm in one day, a total number of individual pass or fail results. That does not include tests that developers have run on their own machines. This will include, like, when we run the same test on 5 different Android devices and so on, like it counts 5 times. So we do a lot of testing. We have learned a lot of things about testing. A passion of mine is trying to make sure that we are not just doing this for ourselves, but that we're taking everything that we're learning about testing and that we're bringing it to you guys as well. I mean, who here would like to make sure that their games are high quality? I would hope most of you. Yes, good. So, we should be making sure that that's something, it's a problem that you guys have that we can be helping you with. So, what are we going to do in this talk? So firstly, hi, I'm Richard Fine. I was on the sustain engineering team at Unity for 3.5 years, helping put out the weekly patch releases, taking care of a lot of last-minute, 11th hour Hail Mary crash remedies and so on for people who are about to ship today and need something right now and so on. So you start to really feel what it's like when you don't have a test in that situation. And in answer to the question I'm sure many of you have, it's because there is really no point owning a red suit if you never wear it. And if you are going to wear it, you might as well wear it in front of a live internet audience. So I'm going to talk for maybe 10 minutes about what we have today. Because I have many conversations about this, and people are like, wait, you have a test framework? You have a bug reporting service? Whoa. So we'll do a little kind of survey of like what's there today. And then after that, I really want you guys to come to the microphones. I could stand here and I could just talk for 45 minutes. Believe me, I could talk for 45 minutes. But I'd rather do something that we can only do when you guys are all here, right? Like I could go on YouTube and just like talk for an hour and that'd be easy. But like having all of you in one place where you can share your experiences and your problems and your pain points and your discoveries, I think that's something that can be really valuable. So a couple of microphones at the back of the room, one there and one there. And at the end of my little spiel, then I'll kind of open it up for you guys to come and talk. But we'll get to that in a bit. So what does Unity have today? The state of the Unity. So first and foremost, we do have this thing called the Unity test framework. What is this? This is a thing that will let you write your tests in C# using 3.5-ish version of NUnit. So this works out very, very cleanly. Like you're writing a function, you're tagging it as test, and then you do whatever you want inside there. Any of the Unity APIs you can call, any of the system APIs you can call. You can do anything, any kind of logic at all. And if it throws an exception or it throws an assertion failure, the test fails. Otherwise, the test passes. It's pretty simple. So you've got that. Once you've written the tests, you can then run them in the editor. And you can run them on devices. You can build and deploy to Android, to iOS, to UWP, I think even the consoles as well. The consoles as well. And run all your tests there and have the results be gathered and sent back to you in the editor. You can run them in play mode in the editor, and you can run them outside of play mode in the editor. Outside of play mode tests are very good for very kind of unit test type things, very fast, quick stuff. Inside play mode is good for, spawn this physics object and make sure that it falls the way I expect it to, or things like that. It'll actually pump the engine loop. And abandon using my watch for this, it's not working very well. An important thing is we use this framework very heavily internally. Okay, so if you are using this as well, you are aligned with us on this. We have other frameworks, but we're transitioning more and more of what we're writing in our new tests onto this framework as well. So if this thing breaks, we will know before you will. So it's a good place to be. So there's I think in the window menu under General, there's Test Runner, and that's your kind of main interface there. You can see it in the screenshot here, and that will kind of show you all of the tests that you found in the solution. You can choose what you run. You can launch things on device and so on there. That's your kind of portal to all of that. But if you also have experience testing C# outside of Unity using NUnit or similar frameworks like XUnit and so on as well, like they all work in a pretty similar way, then all of that just transfers in pretty nicely to Unity as well. So that's the first thing. That's a kind of foundational part for a lot of what we do. So what else have we got? Secondly, if you are interested in QA, testing pipelines and so on, you're going to want to be familiar with batch mode. And batch mode is just running Unity from the command line or on a CI server or something like that. No interaction, no user interface, just kick it off and do some stuff. And one of the things you can do with batch mode is you can tell the editor, please run my tests. You can tell it, run them in edit mode, run them in play mode. You can tell it, please deploy to device and run that way. So if you're setting up a Jenkins setup or anything like that, like you're going to want to be running with this. So yeah, so that includes launching tests on device. And yeah, with this, you can then explore kind of rolling your own test farm. Now, if you don't want to roll your own test farm because you're in the business of making games, not test farms, then you do have the option of using Cloud Build as well. And a little known feature of Cloud Build is that it does support running tests. So once you've written your tests using the Unity test framework, you can go to your project settings for Cloud Build, and you can say, please, like when you're doing the build, run all of the edit mode tests, run all of the play mode tests in the editor as well. It does not yet support running tests on device, but we have plans. We have dreams. We'll get there at some point. And you can kind of set all of that up just through the Cloud Build dashboard. Yeah, so you can have configurations that do tests, configurations that skip the tests if you just want to do something really quick or whatever. It's all fine. And yeah, if you have any tests, like there's really very little downside to just turning this thing on unless your tests are very slow. But what's next? Now, on top of the Unity test framework, what we're starting to do now is we're starting to build domain-specific scaffolds for certain common kinds of testing scenario. So one of the key ones that we have been working on lately is the performance. Sorry, I've got this wrong. Performance reporting is not an extension to the test framework. We have a performance testing framework, which is a different thing I have a later slide on, and I forgot what order they're in. Anyway, performance reporting is a slightly confusingly named service for capturing crashes and exceptions from your deployed game. So any kind of native crash or unhandled exception or something like that can be automatically captured by the engine and uploaded to a service. So this is useful during development. You're able to kind of have everything that QA are running into automatically captured, but it's particularly useful for once you've gone live. Capture everything from on device. As of 2018.3, you're now able to kind of add some custom metadata. So you're able to say, this crash happened in level 7, or things like that, like this crash happened with a character who was set up in this particular way, and so on, to help kind of give you a bit more context for what's happening. And it will also capture the tail of your editor log file as well, so you can see the things that were happening leading up to that. And that is included with Plus and Pro as a thing, part of what you get with that. So we also, in addition to the performance reporting, we also have what's currently called Unity bug reporting. And this is about kind of non-crash issues. So it's a full kind of pipeline for you to be able to have your users kind of hit a button and say, like, I have run into a problem, give you some kind of feedback. It can capture a lot of information from the device. It can take screenshots and all this stuff. But actually, like, the way that we're looking at this as well internally is we're actually pushing it kind of a bit beyond bug reports. You can capture almost any kind of feedback with this, right? The only restriction is that an individual report can be at most 10 megabytes. But you can attach the user save game. You can attach other useful bits of data. And so you can be asking the user, when they've finished a level in your new DLC that you're maybe trying out, you can actually ask them, what did you think of this? Capture their comments, capture any other information, have that kind of come back in. So we have all of these APIs for attaching metadata and renders from different cameras and saves and all of this stuff. As long as it's under 10 megabytes, you're golden. And you can access all of the uploaded reports via the developer dashboard. And I believe we now have things like Jira integration. We have webhooks, so you can get a ping in Slack when there's a new thing come up or anything like that. Yeah. Right. OK, now the performance testing framework. So we've got on top of the Unity test framework now performance testing. So yeah, so the goal here is about sort of measuring, is my frame time where it needs to be? Is my memory usage where it needs to be? And really, all we're really offering with this is kind of like some helpers. So the best thing to do is to see the blog post where we have some examples of this. I didn't want to just put code on a slide because who wants to read code on a slide? But we have really kind of nice, short APIs for you to be able to say, right, OK, like spin for 60 frames to let it settle down, and then run for 300 frames, capture the frame time every frame, or measure just this particular profiler block every frame. Okay, just tell me how long is camera.render taking on this device every frame for 300 frames, and then you get back minimum, maximum, median, deviation, etc. We've got a full kind of result viewer in the editor as well, so you can kind of see how these things are sort of trending and how stable they are and all of this. And again, this is something that we're using very heavily internally in our push for performance and kind of making sure everything is very stable. Another framework that we have is the graphics testing framework. And this is this one kind of slipped out there and no one's noticed because it's actually part of the whole scriptable render pipeline repository on GitHub. It's something that we rolled to be able to do screenshot comparison tests. So for all of our post-processing and like HDRP and lightweight pipeline and so on, we have all of the, like, here's how it should look, here's how it does look, are these close enough? Yes, no, carry on. So the framework will, it provides helpers to be able to do image comparisons with tolerances as well, because it's super important. Like if you just expect everything to be pixel exact, on a console you might get away with that, but on a PC, like with different driver versions and so on, like pixels change a little bit, and it's painful. So we have tools in there to help you kind of manage the tolerance levels and so on, and we have stuff to help you manage the different library of reference images that you might have. So you have this particular scene, it's going to render this way on Android, it's going to render this way on D311, it's going to render this way on Metal, it's going to render this way on OpenGL Core, etc. So we have stuff in there to try and help with that. Now this is very much an alpha framework. We haven't talked about it much yet, just because we're still dogfooding it, and we're still finding things that are awkward, things that are good, and kind of improving it. But it's something to check out. There may be, at the very least, techniques that you could lift from that and use in your own stuff. Or if you want to try it out and give us the feedback, like we can kind of roll that into how we're going with that. So that's pretty much the state of what we have for QA and testing at Unity. It may not seem like much, but we're gradually building up and up and up. And the way that we really want to drive future development on all of this is to listen to the problems that you guys are running into and to listen to the things that we can do to help. Because there's a lot of QA that maybe we are not really in a position to be able to help with as your engine team, right? But there's a lot of things that we can do. And so I want to invite you guys to go to the microphones there and there. And there's a couple of questions that I have in particular, but I encourage you to share anything that you want to share. So firstly, what is QA and testing like on your project today? Like, is it a good process? Is it a chaotic process? Does it go well? Does it involve using automation or not? Maybe it's an entirely manual process. Do you have a test plan? Secondly, what's the biggest unsolved QA problem that you've got? Right? I'm not necessarily saying that I will be able to solve the problem for you, but maybe someone else in the room can, right? Let's share, what is the one thing where if we had that, we'd be able to kind of push forward, we'd be able to have our QA people spend more time being devious and not kind of testing mundane things and so on. Thirdly, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to your fellow developers regarding quality and testing? Now, maybe this is just my personal take on this, but like, I really don't think that QA is an area where we should be trying to compete with each other, right? I mean, we should all be trying to help everyone make quality stuff, right? If a game is going to fail, it shouldn't be because it was buggy. It should be because, it's the wrong thing for the market or something like that. Like, let's not have our work kind of fall apart because we didn't realize that there was a clever way to write a test or something like that, right? So let's help each other with that. People may disagree. And then lastly, what's the most impactful thing that Unity could do to make your QA easier, faster, and better? Not necessarily automation frameworks, like is there tooling we should put into the editor, or are there things that we should try and expose, are there things about the business model, or whatever, any kind of thing. So yeah, at this point I will open up to questions. So let's start over here.
Hi, cool. One of the big issues we've had in trying to set up unit tests is if you want to do something, say, in a farther level in the game, and you, to even get to that point, need to log in, spawn your character, do all this stuff, it kind of boggles the mind to even think, how could I get it to this state way out here where I can test it? Is there any sort of memory capture or something in Unity testing that we could use to get to those states?
Right. So yeah, so there's nothing in Unity that could explicitly do that right now. What I will note is that that's kind of a close problem to dealing with safe games, right? So being able to kind of take key bits of the state and dump them to JSON or something like that, and then load that back in. That problem, I think, is usually more pronounced when you're trying to add the tests later on, right? Like if you've kind of, when you were building everything up front, if you were thinking, okay, we're going to need to be able to kind of jump into any given situation and try stuff out, then it influences the way that you architect things in the first place. Yeah. So being able to like skip the login and being able to say, okay, right, like I don't want to have to play through the whole level. I want to be able to spawn it up at this point and so on. Like one of the things about doing kind of early testing in development is that it increases testability of the code. Now you might look at that and say, was it really worth doing that just for the tests? But in my experience, every single time I've done something for testability, about 2 weeks later, I've then run into like a legit gameplay reason why the same APIs are helpful. It's a balancing act, but yeah, there's nothing built in that we can just like snap and restore. The other thing, of course, is that if we did have that, how would we reconcile that with changes that you've made to the game since we did the capture? Like you don't want to be in this position. Like one of the big problems with the golden screenshot tests is you have breakage, but you also have legitimate changes. And you don't really want to be in the position of having to repeatedly regenerate all the images all the time. The same thing might happen with the memory captures. So there are ways of kind of capturing some information, but I think ultimately how that gets reconstructed is something that we're not going to be able to fully solve for you ever. It's always going to be somewhat dependent on your game and your workflows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's go back.
Hello.
Hey.
My name's Colin. I'm the only QA tester at Alchemy Labs. So mine's more of an issue we had and how we took that approach to solve it in lack of the tools. Turns out testing in VR is super tedious and terrible. So after about 4 months of working on Rick and Morty VR and taking my headset off and pulling out my phone to take notes down and trying to hold my headset over here and take screenshots over here, I ended up writing a tool that made my life infinitely easier. So the tool is called Trello Helper, and it used both Trello's API and Google's speech-to-text cloud API to let me record my voice in VR, take screenshots in VR, and upload the whole thing with an editor log to Trello into our triage column.
Right.
So that's been really useful, but the number one problem we have with the tool is that with the IL2 CPP backend, serialization is busted.
Right.
So we've started working on binary serialization for our save states, but really haven't gotten around to getting that to work with our JSON utility.
Right. Okay.
While it's really useful for editor, we really aren't able to get that in builds. So having some sort of testing solution for us in builds, even if it's just something that lets me, dump a log file somewhere where I can go through that information and parse it later, it'd be super useful.
Okay. I mean, so firstly, it's super cool, the speech-to-text thing. Like, that is a really clever solution for the VR stuff. Like, that's really neat. I love that. It sounds like possibly the bug reporting service might be able to help with some of that. So the problem that you have is serializing the information that you want to attach to the report.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. we have to make some improvements to serialization. Yeah, we know this. Now that we have finally seen the last of the .NET scripting backend on UWP, and I don't mean like the .NET framework, but specifically this deploying to UWP using .NET, running it on the Microsoft's framework. Now that that is gone, IL2CPP and Mono are both using the same serialization framework, which makes adding anything and changing anything like orders of magnitude more possible. It's just a matter of then when that's going to happen and what we prioritize first. Dictionary support, maybe, hopefully. Yeah, no, I mean, we have to kind of find specific things. If you want to give me more feedback after the show about like exactly which kind of things you've run into with serialization, then I can see if there's anything I can suggest.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So under the continuing category of VR is hard, is there anything in the framework, anything you're aware of to dealing with having to run QA tests on multiple machines simultaneously with a lot of external dependencies that are bad at replicating synthetic data? So for example, our project literally needs 5 computers to run. They need to be running different versions of different configs.
Right.
And then they rely on a lot of external data from systems that have no ability to send a synthetic signal.
Right.
So we end up literally having 5 people for every QA run all day long.
So and you're running the same test on each one, or are the 5 machines actually networked?
It's effectively one set of tests.
Right.
It's the one set of tests. It just literally requires 5 humans to actually run
I see. To actually execute. Yeah.
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 Some of this is standard multiplayer problem, but some of this is like, no, it needs to be on real hardware.
Yeah, so I guess the first biggest problem I see in that actually isn't even the 5 machines thing. It's the non-deterministic synthetic data source thing. Yeah, finding ways to kind of set up and play back that data. Like, you have to be able to mock it somehow. Like, that's the only real option. Like, it's like doing input testing in general. Like, it's, you don't really want to go to the level of like writing fake device drivers and so on, but like occasionally that is what it takes. Ideally, you cauterize things at a slightly higher level than that, and then you're able to just kind of pull in data that you captured from something and then spool it back, at a fixed frame rate, like this value, this frame, and so on. I've been exploring a little bit using timeline actually for recording and playing back input values. I haven't got anything to really show on that yet, but it seems like it could be an interesting way to go. Yeah, like that would be the first thing. Like that has to become predictable, repeatable, and automatable. Once that's done, I guess I would wonder whether or not they will have to be on separate machines. I mean, as we move into the ECS world as well, there is this concept in ECS of a world, which is kind of the entities and components for one particular kind of full state of things. And in principle, I know one of the ideas is to be able to support multiple worlds. So you could actually simulate a 5-player multiplayer setup with 5 worlds in a single process and kind of step them all together and work them all together and so on. Obviously, ECS is maybe not what you're going to be using today, but that's going to come in the future. Yeah, I mean, beyond that, a lot of it comes down to trying to be as permissive as possible as to what you need the test to be checking. If you need everything to be received in exact same packet order and so on as they're communicating with devices, it's going to be far more fragile. If you're able to just say, look, okay, like after 50 milliseconds, this thing has to have happened. Doesn't matter exactly when in that 50 milliseconds, then you get a bit more stability out of it. So that's what I'd say for now.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. I loved the scriptable object talk from a couple years ago. That was really good. I had a quick question about, I guess, Jenkins and Docker.
Okay.
I know that Docker has an official Windows Server version coming out.
Yes.
And so I'm in a very regulated industry, so we can't really use cloud build and things.
Yep.
So I was wondering if there going to be an official Docker image or official support to do batch mode runs.
So I know that people at Unity have been working on Dockerizing the editor. I don't know whether it's Windows or Linux actually, but yeah, I don't know whether or not we'll ever have an official one that we just provide ourselves, but it's definitely going to become a supported scenario. Like there's too many people who want to do this now that we can't
Yeah.
ignore that. So that should get easier at the very least if you're going to spin it up yourself, or maybe we'll have something official.
Okay, and I guess the other issue with us is licensing.
Yes. I don't know how much I can say about what we're doing on that at the moment. We are overhauling the licensing
Okay.
implementation. Like in particular, in particular, we are going to be trying to get rid of the machine locking.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
So it just becomes user-based instead. So you've bought a subscription for a seat for a user. It shouldn't matter which computer they're on anymore, right? And we'll be figuring out solutions for build farms and so on as well.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Thank you.
okay.
Had a question about Unity Test Runner. So one of the problems that we have massive amount of unit tests in our project, and we want to be able to test prefabs for instantiation and so on and so on.
Yeah.
The problem is there's no way to really serialize and have access to a prefab other than like ACID database that load prefab from things. Is there any support coming for?
So I guess, actually, I mean, so one of the things I've been exploring is specifically content validation tests, right? And I've been doing the exact kind of thing of like, for every prefab in this folder, make sure that it has this component, make sure that this reference is set up, and so on, right? Is that the kind of testing you're talking about?
Yeah, basically we want to check like if a merge like wiped out a reference of something in an asset.
Right. So I'm using aciddatabase.load for that, and it's working quite comfortably. But the thing in particular that I'm doing is I'm using parametric tests. Right, so I've got like a thing that is scanning a folder to find all the prefabs in it, and then generating a test suite instance for each one of those prefabs. And then within the suite, I'm able to just say, okay, like it's been constructed with this prefab reference, and then all the individual tests in the suite just use that reference directly. So there's nothing that has to be serialized. I mean, if you did specifically want to sort of say, right, okay, this suite of tests needs to use this specific list of prefabs to test, like I only care about these specific ones. I mean, either you would approach that using like a naming convention to mark out which ones you care about, or you could use a scriptable object. You have an asset that stores the references to the things you care about, and then the test, the parametric test fixture source uses the scriptable object to say, okay, here are the instances I should make.
Yeah, the only worry on that is like, what if someone moves files around and such like that? Like at least with a serialized like reference to the
So
asset
if you have a
included
scriptable object pointing at prefabs, you can move the prefab around and that's fine. Like the serialized references are all GUID based. So as long as you're moving the prefab and its .meta file at the same time, then the references should work just fine.
Cool.
Okay.
How you doing? I'll walk down your bullet points. Hey, cool. Our environment, we have a lot of testing. We have a family of testing using XUnit outside of Unity code that is non-Unity API dependence. And then we have tests that are the Unity edit mode tests, and we have a handful of the play mode tests. Okay. Those run with our CI/CD, validating the build before build pass, etc. Biggest unsolved QA problem, we'd like to do more integration tests, like play mode tests,
right.
But at the end of the day, like you're saying, the thing you already touched on, scripting input, basically. And I mean, with the new input system, sure, input replay is not always deterministic, but at the end of the day, it'd be useful to say, the player did X, Y, Z, maybe we can play that back.
Yeah, so definitely recording and playing back input is going to be possible in the new input system.
Okay,
there's just like a low-level event stream, and you'll be able to inject stuff into that. I'm pretty sure that's already in trunk. But that's definitely a supported thing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, generalized replay system, it's a lot easier to implement it that way. One piece of advice for all the people out there is, I've seen a lot of people where you need to test every single line of code no matter what. And ultimately, you'll get a lot of tests that will never, ever, ever break. So, that's something to think about. Make QA easier, faster, better. Personally, I'd like more access to getting a little more logging information around when play mode and edit modes test and run. Just having maybe a stream or something that says, we ran this test, and I want to be able to react or log to that or something like that.
All right, so to be able to integrate the test better into your pipeline.
Yeah, into the pipeline at all, instead of just, I passed. I mean, we already do it through the command line, but something like that would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, the APIs that we offer for launching tests in the editor, we don't have any explicit APIs. But if you poke around, you actually realize that because we're just kind of embedding NUnit for you, If you poke around inside the NUnit internals, then you find actually there are public classes there that you can use to construct a suite, launch it, read back the results, and so on. One of the experiments I've done is integrating it directly into the build process, such that in the post-process scene attribute, being able to say, like, okay, like when the scene is being loaded and being fed through the build pipeline, at that time, run the scene validation tests on it. And if any of them fail, stop the build.
Nice.
Which is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little awkward. One of the things that I'm working on as a spare time project is like best practices information. And it shouldn't really be a spare time project. It should be a proper project, but still, it's a start. And showing how to do these things, showing how to be like, okay, like I want to construct a custom set of tests and launch them now. Like definitely want to kind of include that kind of thing in there, as well as things like how to do input recording and playback and all of that stuff. Because yeah, it's easy to, well, it's moderately easy to kind of start doing this stuff, but very quickly I think people find that they've done it in a way that bites them, and then they never want to do it again.
Right, exactly.
And that is very much counter to my goal with this. I'd like people to have tests and be doing tests in a way that actually is useful, rather than them being like, well, I tried that testing thing one time and it was a pain, and it didn't help, and now I'm never doing it again. It's like, no, like, I mean, as you said, the people who are writing the test to make sure they have 100% coverage, for example, it's like, I mean, coverage is a useful tool, but that is a mistake to be overly concerned with 100% coverage. Speaking of which, we are working on coverage support as well. Preempting that question, because it's useful to be able to spot, oh, hey, I've forgotten to have any tests for error situations in this class, etc. But like worrying about every individual line of code is a mistake for sure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Martin from Metromax. In the company, we have our own continuous integration system, and one of our problems is that the first job of the pipeline is running the tests. And the project that we have, they are really big, like 2 giga of a project. And the reimport part, it's expensive. It takes like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The problem is that we don't use the cache server because we have virtual machines that are ephemeral.
Right.
And every process, Unity opens and reports everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is some way to tell to not report.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky, that one, just because obviously for many of the tests that you'd want to run, you're going to need the assets to have been imported as well. So knowing which things can be imported and which things can't, like something I played around with at some point was saying, well, let's defer, like let's be able to skip asset import, but still do it for scripts and DLLs. But yeah, like it gets a little difficult. The real solution to that is the background asset importing, which we're still working on. So being able to open the project, it will compile scripts, but otherwise, like it just then begins working on everything else in the background, and then it will only block execution of tests when you try accessing something that has not yet been imported. So it's still very much on the roadmap, but yeah, there's nothing on that today.
Well, thanks.
To the last guy, we do some clever tricks using version control in order to ignore these things on a higher level. So Unity doesn't actually get those. So we have a lot of art assets, but we create perforce streams to filter out those art assets for things like a testing stream. So I can ignore 10,000 textures and not have to get hit with that import cost. Just get the scripts, get any dependencies. You're going to pay for the overhead in managing that, but it will fix the import problems that you see, because it's textures and meshes that are going to hit you with those huge costs. To kind of go a little bit away from that, we do console work. We have IL to CPP. One of our huge problems is we avoid doing our tests in IL to CPP because we pay the compilation cost.
Yes.
IL to CPP's compilation cost is significantly higher than Mono.
Yep.
And while this doesn't work for an automation solution, just testing as a developer on your own machine, IL2CPP incremental builds do not actually work.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is very much a known problem for the IL2CPP team. And it's another one of these things that is hitting us internally as well, because we're using these frameworks. We're trying to run our test suites on IL2CPP platforms, and we're seeing like running a suite of tests taking like 2 hours or something ridiculous. So yeah, like it's hurting us as well. It's a high priority for the team to improve. Like compilation times in general. Things that I know we've talked about are things like caching, the core lib conversion to C++ and so on, so that the only stuff we have to recompile is your code, not the things that we can pretty much guarantee have not changed. But yeah, doing caching, doing smart reuse, doing smarter how we divide up things in compilation units, it's absolutely kind of stuff that the team are all thinking about and kicking around.
Yeah. Another one to go into is we want to do actual script-only builds. Basically, I want to just invoke the compiler and do it through Unity, not through my own means where I have to, do the update for every time Unity adds a separate define or decides to link a different dependency and do that. If I just want to be able to tell Unity, I want you just to compile the scripts.
Right.
I want you to just compile those scripts for this platform.
Right.
So that we can catch, a lot of times we have developers who are working on PC standalone, but writing code that may affect console due to various API usages.
Okay, I see.
And if they don't test that build with the defines that the editor makes, we get a build, the build fails. I'd rather do that in a CI compilation only that happens per commit.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah, because I guess in principle, like opening the project in whichever platform you need, and then just seeing was it able to compile successfully or not, will kind of tell you what you want. But you're still spending a lot of time there importing other assets and so on.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's again, that's how I solved the problem right now. Is we created a scripts only stream. And we build that. But having an ability to have an actual scripts only build instead of the current scripts only build, which is just, we're going to take your existing assets, use those, and just recompile the scripts instead. That obviously doesn't work for this scenario.
And I think this is another one of these things where once we have the background asset import, it's going to pretty much solve the problem as well. Like you'll be able to open the project, and without having to worry about making a separate stream for it all, you'll know straight away was it able to compile the scripts or not. But I don't have. I think probably the solution that you have right now is the best thing I could come up with.
Okay.
Because trying to, like, particularly now that we have things like assembly definition files as well, trying to fully grok kind of what compilation is going to happen without just launching the editor entirely and having it do stuff, it's not really a winning proposition. Introducing something where it was like, please only compile the scripts and then just stop. We could try and do that, but it starts getting awkward then that you start saying, okay, well, actually, I do need a few of the assets, and then you have to manually manage your own imports. And the best thing is going to be that we just plow on with trying to get the background asset import finished so we can ship that out. And then, for now, keep doing what you're doing. Sorry, I don't have a better answer than that.
No, it's right. Thank you.
Nice.
So I haven't had time to look into the performance testing framework yet, but you mentioning it here got me thinking, is it possible to run that in batch mode? So with CI, you could catch performance regressions?
Yes,
okay.
Very much so. Yeah, that is exactly what we do. Like all of the frameworks that we're building internally, they're all running primarily on our CI. Like if we have a test framework that we can't run on CI, we really have to justify quite hard why it's worth writing it. All of this is running on our build farms, multiple devices, multiple platforms. And then like we have this this internal kind of database website where all the results are just being pooled together, and so we're able to say like show me how performance in this build compares to 3 months ago or something like that, and then just have like graphs of how it has changed over time and all of this stuff. Elements of that I think are in what we ship now, like exactly how you'd want to manage that data yourself is a little bit up to you. It absolutely works in batch mode.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi again. For the gentleman that was here back, would cache servers help?
We do use cache server due to the large amount of assets that we pull and our custom, we have a custom import pipeline. We pay that cost as well.
Oh, okay.
So while it does download from the cache,
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. I guess so. My question, or another kind of side question, is trying to deal with asynchronous kind of going back and forth, where we're like hitting kind of an external server and back.
Yes.
I guess I'm just trying to think of good ways to do testing like that without incurring the constant kind of back and forth costs.
Yep. So something that we've done internally for that is we spin up what we call the fake web server, which is another HTTP server running on the same machine, and then I think possibly we use HTTP proxies, or possibly we just have the test code change the URI for the endpoint that the service is going to talk to the fake web server instead. And then we can configure it, when you get this request, please respond with this response. So just mocking out the entire external service.
Yeah, okay.
And we've had that working across devices as well. So we can actually tell the attached iOS device, please talk to the host machine for this service, and kind of have that work that way. Although you can, in principle, I think, as long as the device supports it, you should be able to do it all on device as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, minimizing external dependencies and so on is definitely something you want to do for stability reasons.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any more? Nope. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and I hope it's been a useful session for you. I'll be here for another 5 minutes, and then out to the Q&A session outside if anyone wants to follow up with me privately about anything that I've talked about. And otherwise, have a great Unite.